Yes, right?
Yeah.
And so, where are you from, Pierre?
Middle of nowhere.
Center?
Yeah. North central western area. Yeah, it's Athens. You've never heard of it. It's middle of nowhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so Brian is the owner and distiller at Flag Hill Winery, where we are in Distillery, and has graciously brought us on. So, like I said, I was just giving some of the early folks some tips, but bottom line is that all the students are writing a facility evaluation on one of 4 facilities. We're going to 6 total, so they may or may not write it on this. I would strongly encourage you to do it on these first couple because we grade progressively harder. But remember what you, like I slipped that in. But we remember what you're looking for, right? The big takeaways, the pros and cons of the facilities, right? Just 1 or 2 of each or 2 of each, and then maintenance related issues. And then overall, remember the whole undercurrent of this class is to expose you all to different types of rec facilities that you may not have even known existed, such as this beautiful place right in our backyard, like literally 11 minutes away. So without further ado.
Cool. Thank you everybody for coming by. I can talk really quick, so if I say something, especially with a mask on, you can't see what I'm saying. If you need me to stop and repeat it, just shout at me because I can blow past something and we'll be on to the next thing. I also can sometimes think that I understand something really, really well and say something that no one else understands. So if that happens again,
Story of my life, bro.
yeah, just wave me down and say, hey, I don't get what you're saying. So as introduced, this is Flag Hill Distillery and Winery. We are one of the only farm distilleries in the nation. We're really focused on growing all of our agriculture for our whiskey production and all of our grapes for our wine production. And I'll kind of go over some more of that stuff as we kind of go on. And we are a wedding venue. We do wedding and events. We do about 50 weddings or so a year on average. This year would have been, I think, 51 or 52 weddings. We're down to about 20. I'll kind of touch on some of that stuff.
If you're doing the math, that's pretty intense. That's a wedding a week. You know?
Yeah, we do, during the summer, we do about 3 weddings a weekend on average. We do have, every now and then we'll have a 4-wedding weekend where it's either a Monday or a Thursday or a Friday, but they're pretty rare. Despite what any venue owner will tell you, that they do a bunch of them. We don't. There's not a huge demand for Monday 3 o'clock weddings. So we do typically in the summer, May through October, so the first week of May through the last week in October. We do usually 2 to 3 weddings, and if we don't have a 3rd wedding, we typically do an event of our own. So the way we've kind of made this work for us at Flag Hill is we've put in a couple different events that we've tried to brand and create a specific feel around and try to keep people coming back to that thing. So we do a brunch, we call it Brunch and Bubbles. It's once a month in the summer. We lost money on this event for the first year and a half that we did it. It was a loss leader essentially because it was, we get almost 200 people through the door for the brunch, and then they would go into the tasting room and buy wines and spirits, which kind of offset the loss from the catering. And that's one thing I should, if I don't touch on it again, please bring it back up, is multiple forms of revenue, multiple ways to produce revenue from one location. So the idea with Brunch and Bubbles is all you can eat, but it's very different than a buffet. Right? So we have a very specific image of what we think of with a buffet, and we wanted to create a more high-end experience, more eloquent experience than a normal buffet. So it's stations. So each station has kind of its own theme. Each of the stations from month to month changes a little bit based on what the chef has available to him. We are farms, so we try to grow everything. We don't grow everything here, but we try to grow everything that makes a meaningful impact to the product here.
Does that position you well within the region? Are you one of the few that does like true farm to table?
So there's not a lot. Yeah. So the in food, so this is kind of a little bit off topic from what the class is, but in food service, there is a huge problem with fraud and what people say they're doing versus what they're actually doing. A lot of the farm-to-table establishments you hear about, maybe they buy their garlic from a local local garlic supplier. You know, something like that. And then
And everything else
Everything
coming from
else.
a truck.
everything else comes from a truck. And we do buy stuff from a truck. There's, you know, I'd be lying if I said we didn't. You know, we go through, you know, it's nothing for us to have 600, 700, maybe even 900 people here on a weekend. And that would be, you know, when we talk about putting chicken on plate, it'd be, you know, 600, 700 birds. It's hard to have a wedding venue on a working chicken farm that produces 600 to 700 meat birds a week. Those two
Conflicting
things.
goals there, right?
Conflicting goals.
Got some stink is what
yeah,
he's getting at.
the smell of that
Yeah.
does not coincide with what we think of for a wedding venue.
If you've ever had the pleasure of being in a chicken house, you
Yeah,
understand.
it's pretty rough. So, so there's a balance to all these things, right? And that's kind of a theme that you'll see we talk about quite a bit. Is you got to counterbalance kind of everything here. The brunch was designed, and it's all you can drink sparkling wine that we make here on the farm. And we built that so it sells basically 170-ish seats per brunch. And so we're usually sold out, usually a few months in advance. And that allows us to provide, the idea was in an economic downturn, if we had weddings fall off, we could add more brunches in. And it would help offset that. What we didn't account for was that the economic downturn would be caused by pandemic. So the model we had built for brunch doesn't really work for this scenario. But the idea was to build resiliency into our business model, so that there was multiple ways to produce revenue from this very expensive unit to put up and take down every year and maintain and take care of.
This would be a huge pro, right? If you're talking about positive things, right? Multiple streams of income, and the way he's framing that, resiliency, right? In other words, being able to adapt to various economic climates. No one was, of course, prepared for a global pandemic, but here we are.
Yeah, in the events industry. So in 2008, when the events industry, when there was a significant global economic U.S. economic downturn, as well as global economic downturn. When we had that issue, it significantly affected weddings and events. We canceled weddings and events left and right. So our goal was to, again, kind of build other ways to produce revenue in a scenario like that. So we are a farm that has figured out a way to add in all these other ways to make revenue from the farm and keep the farm alive. So this is what we call agricultural tourism. This whole concept of what is here at Flag Hill is what we call agricultural tourism. So the idea is, and this is continuing to be more and more true as time goes on, and will continue to be more and more true. It doesn't seem like it's going the opposite way. People, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, everyone grew up on a farm or knew somebody who grew up on a farm. You had access to farms. You had access to the outdoors. Today, there's less and less of that. So there is quite a bit of excitement around coming to a place like this, coming to an establishment like this, where you can sit outside, have a glass of wine, walk around the farm, be outdoors, kind of be separated, still have all the niceties that we all love, but kind of be separated from the busyness of the city. This works really well for us here in New Hampshire because we're not that far we're about an hour from Boston right here, depending on where you are in Boston. And so we get a lot of excitement around that concept, and we'll keep kind of touching on these little points as we go on. One thing I want to kind of address while we're out here. So there's a lot of management to a place like this. A lot of different moving pieces, a lot of things going on. One thing that I would highly recommend paying attention to. If it sounded like you have some people that want to become event planners.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good feeling.
So there's a couple different things that I want to highlight, and this is kind of where it begins. When we're managing a facility like this, we have an alcohol license. That alcohol license is basically the bread and butter of what keeps all the lights on. So it's very important that we follow all the laws, all the rules and regulations that come along with being the recipient holder of an alcohol license. One of those things in New Hampshire specifically is drinking in the parking lot. It's illegal to have alcohol in the parking lot. So we actually, because of the design of our facility, which is less perfectly set up than you could set it if you're building something from the ground up to think about this. We basically have to make sure that we have people in the parking lot as attendees are coming in, because it's very easy for somebody to pull in. They're coming to a wedding, right? Nobody comes to a wedding. Very few people come to a wedding to have one beer, right? They usually drink a little bit more than that. They show up in the parking lot. They have a case of beer. You now are liable for this moment. So liable. Do we all know what that term means? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we talked about liability.
Great. So, once they're on your property, liability is a significant issue. This is something that I can't stress enough. Into the actual functioning of a facility, actual performance of an event is the easy part. That is definitely the easy part. The hard part is making sure that you don't get sued, or don't get in trouble with the law by breaking some laws. So. Once somebody shows up, they're having, they have 3 or 4 beers in their car. They come out here, and they come into the bar area, and they get a glass of whiskey. Then they go back out, have 3 or 4 more beers, and then they come back in, want to get another glass of whiskey from the bartender. The bartender's mind, it's only been 2 drinks, right, in maybe 2 hours, so it's really a non-issue. But little do we know that going on in the parking lot, we had much more alcohol consumption than what we were expecting. So the setup of our facility right here makes us have to spend more labor to make sure we're managing that, because it's a long distance from the edges of the parking lot to here. So just the time it takes to walk that distance, right? If you have to walk that 10 times in a night, let's say it's 2-3 minutes each way, you add all that time up, and it really equates to a number, and then you add that times 50 weddings a year, and all of a sudden you've got how many extra man hours or woman hours of labor that we've spent to do something that if we would have thought about this in the pre-design of our system, may have prevented all this extra labor. So the other thing I want to talk about in parking lot is maintenance. So if you notice, this is why I'm bringing this up now, because we're actually doing this. Notice all the cracks that you see forming right there
On the asphalt?
On the asphalt. So those cracks, because we live in the Northeast, are just wonderful. They fill with water in the late fall, and then when it gets cold, what does water do when it gets cold? It expands, right? When it freezes, it expands. So if you noticed on the way in, there's 2 potholes that have opened up, kind of on the front of the parking lot area. Both of those potholes were not there last year. It happened because we get the cracks forming, and then water gets in there, busts up the asphalt, and then it leads to very expensive maintenance, versus we could have done preventative maintenance originally, and it would have prevented that issue from occurring.
Jackpot.
So
it's all about the preventative maintenance, right? So preventative maintenance being filling in potholes or staying on top of your asphalt surfaces, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about the difference between resurfacing a lot and putting down some tar, and resurfacing for, maybe I'll use an example. A normal driveway to resurface would maybe be $2,000 versus $10,000 to completely rip it out and redo it.
I need your paving guy.
Yes. I mean, and you got a lot of asphalt.
He's a lot
here.
cheaper than my
guy.
guy.
Yeah, maybe I'm off, but a lot more is what I'm getting at.
So bringing in somebody to do crack sealing is very affordable. And from my understanding of it and experience, there's two strategies. We can just crack seal, or we can crack seal and seal coat. My understanding and research on this is that just doing the seal coating makes it look really nice, which can matter. If you're an event venue, that can matter, right?
That's like that beautiful kind of black top look.
Yep, that can matter, but it doesn't actually make a meaningful difference to the structural integrity of the asphalt. What will is doing crack sealing, getting all the cracks filled. That way the water doesn't get in there and bust up and create the potholes which cause for the expensive maintenance. Another thing that I want to point out while we're out here, if we look up, these lights were installed quite a while ago. Yeah, go ahead.
What kind of lighting are we looking at here, folks? Okay, it's direct lighting, check. But what kind of lighting do we think we have up there? Anyone care to guess? It's sort of a funky light. What is that, Brian?
Halogens.
It's halogen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
What do we know about halogen lighting? Anybody? Takes a while to heat up, right? What else? Is it, where is it on the efficiency standpoint? Remember, is it like really inefficient or really efficient? Help me out here. Kind of in the middle, right? Okay.
So, we are, so basically at the end of every year, we go through, if you're running an operation efficiently, hopefully you're turning a profit. And if you're turning a profit, at the end of the year, you go through and talk to your accountant. Hopefully you're doing this before the end of the year. But usually at that point, you're making some decisions on how to be tax advantageous to keep the money as much as you can, keep the value as much as you can inside of your business. One of the great ways to spend money at the end of the year, or I mean at any time, but is on energy efficiency, because that will always pay dividends, right? The more energy efficient your facility becomes, the less issue you have month to month with all the different bills. So this is on a list for us. At the end of this year, we're going to reevaluate and probably put in LEDs, which are much more cost effective.
What would be some other pros of LED lights from the crew here? Why might you go LED? Yep.
They take faster to light up and they're brighter.
Yeah, immediate, right? What else? What are other pros and cons of LED?
They last forever.
They last a much longer time. Yeah. What else? Good. Keep them rolling. Talk to me about color.
You can change the color.
Right, immediately. What are cons of LED? It's expensive, and what's the other one? Nico, you moved. It's pretty hot, yeah.
Oh,
The other one?
You need someone that knows how to maintain them.
It takes some technical know-how. It's a little bit more than a plug-and-play light.
Yeah, they're a little bit more. And the other negative is they're expensive up front.
Up front.
They are, but cash is king. Cash flow can be difficult. And even though it's oftentimes this is how it works in business. It's oftentimes you can see the advantage of doing thing A, but it is met head on with what is in your bank account
Right.
at that moment.
Everybody wants LED lights, right?
Exactly.
You see
yeah.
the price tag.
Exactly. Yeah, it can be really expensive. So these lights have been up for I think going on 10 years now. So they're really at the end of their life, or approaching the end of their life. So we start looking at things we can do. We could replace them in kind, or this is one of those moments where you say, is it time to upgrade? We got to do it anyways. There's all these other benefits to doing it. So as we approach that, it may not be this year specifically because of the financial situation we're all in with COVID, but this is on the agenda. We go through every year and kind of walk around the facility and come up with a list of all the things we need to see done in a year, or that are coming due, and figure out which things have kind of the highest priority. The other thing that I want to point out here, if we look around, there's a lot of things. So if I walked into a facility like this, one of the first things I would notice is all of these fence posts that you see everywhere. All of those things that you see all need to be stained or painted often, right? To make sure that the integrity of the wood stays. So you don't have to do very costly repairs of rebuilding the staircase or redoing the fence. So all this stuff, we have basically a yearly checklist of things that our crew that works in the vineyard, we have them do usually on a Thursday or a Friday. So we usually work in the vineyard Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. This will be a little different if we're at a different facility. Some people do this by having contracts with a maintenance company or full-time employing somebody to do this kind of stuff. The way we do a lot of this stuff, we have a full-time maintenance person, but we also have on average about 4 people a year that are working in the vineyard, and we usually go do some of these other projects when time allows. So all of this fencing around here, everything you see, takes 4 people about a day to 2 days to scrape, and then 4 people about 2 days to paint.
So it's a week's worth of work almost for an entire crew of 4 people, right?
So
It's a
that's
lot of cash.
every year.
Wages.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's every year.
Materials.
It's a lot of maintenance. The vast majority of a facility like this, a vast majority of our expenses in a year are on facilities maintenance, making sure everything stays pretty, because that's why people are coming here. But B, also protected. A lot of the stuff that you do to make something pretty also keeps it from deteriorating to the point where you have to replace it, which saves money in the long term.
And what's our overall percentage? Over a lifetime of facility, what percent of your costs are going to go towards maintenance? 70%, right? The vast majority. And
Pretty crazy.
exactly what Brian's talking about here, right? And this is another perfect example. I mean, Brian's just giving you gifts here on a silver platter of another preventative maintenance, right? It's little things, you know, they're not like these hot, sexy things, you know, you're not putting in like something awesome, you're literally stripping and painting poles, but it's going to cost you a lot in the wallet to replace all this fencing.
Yep. Was there any questions about anything right over here? Cool.
Brian, I just wanted to, one thing, I think you were sort of getting to it, and I apologize if you're going to get to it, but when we're talking about liability, as I recall, certain parcel out, aren't they different entities?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I can talk about that really briefly. Yes, I was.
I'm jumping ahead.
No, you're
We can
good.
wait till later.
No,
Yeah.
you're good. I'll bring it up now. It's a good thing to talk about. So liability, as we talked about, is a very big concern. It's very easy. This is a big facility. There's a lot of things that can go wrong here, and it's hard to nerf every part of the facility, right? So you can't put everybody in a bubble when they show up here. So there is always opportunity for failure, always, no matter how much precaution you take. So kind of the next step of how we think about all of this in terms of liability is we actually break up our entities, our organization into separate entities. So we do a lot of different things.
Big pro. This is a very smart move.
Yeah, we do a lot of different things here at Flag Hill. We have a distillery, we have a winery, we have a farm operation, we own real estate, and we do catering events. So that's food service, and now we're basically doing lodging as well, which isn't Flag Hill, just Flag Hill. It's not under the Flag Hill name, but it's with us. So. So basically what we've done is do we all know the different structures? There's different corporate structures, right? So as a sole proprietor, I can own, I'm not going to own a partnership obviously, but I can own an S Corp or a C Corp or an LLC or a PLLC. Have we talked about any of these things?
Not
or do you know?
really, but yeah.
Okay,
we
so
have general knowledge of these different types, but not in this class.
yeah, so just really briefly, LLCs are typically limited liability corporations, are typically what small businesses like ours use. So we have, and there's pros and cons with tax strategies and how people get paid out, how ownership distributions are distributed. So there's a lot of different things to go into this, and I don't want to go too deep into that. But basically, each one of these entities basically provides kind of a legal bubble that entity is wrapped up inside of, that everything that entity owns is wrapped up inside of. So this is, probably less than the perfect example, but let's say, obviously we're doing everything we can to manage alcohol. We are very concerned about making sure that people are not served that appear intoxicated, right? This is wildly crucial. And this is a hard thing to do too, because the bartenders want to make money, right? They serve the drink, they're going to make a couple extra dollars. So every drink they serve is a benefit to them.
You're talking about a lot of people, right? 900, 800 people at an event,
Right.
you know?
And we obviously want alcohol sales. It's what keeps our business in operation. The whole thing is basically founded on the service and sale of alcohol. So obviously that matters to us. But we have to counterbalance that versus the risk of over-serving somebody, or running the risk of over-serving somebody, somebody having too much alcohol, being legally intoxicated, pulling out of here and hitting somebody, or even personal damage to themselves, falling down stairs, or whatever it might be. These are all things that we're on the hook for and liable for. So despite all of our best efforts to make sure that this doesn't occur, the chance is that it still could. It's still possible. So what we've done is each one of these entities, each one of the operations is wrapped up into its own legal entity. So this right here is Flag Hill Catering and Events. And the reason we've done that is that way if somebody they drink too much and they hurt somebody on accident, then we don't have to lose the distillery and the winery and all of those things. And the assets for the catering company are wrapped up inside of the catering company. So if an attorney were to come sue, they're suing just that entity. Now, in the real world, the way this works is that's just a kind of a mid-level obstacle, and a really good attorney can figure out a way through that. But it is
Obstacle nonetheless.
yeah, it's still an obstacle, and the more of those you put up against attorneys, there's no aspiring attorneys in the room, right?
No, we're Rec Park and Tourism.
Great.
That's all good, yeah. But do you guys understand it's a really critical piece, right? Is that you have these different entities. So you've got the event portion, the catering, you've got the distillery, you've got the farm. Effectively, in the eyes of the legal world, they're all under different management structures. Maybe an LLC, maybe sole proprietor, whatever. The bottom line is that worst case scenario, knock on wood, right, is that something terrible happens at one of them. It doesn't take down the whole ship.
Right. Exactly.
That's the idea.
And
Self-preservation.
And another thought there is, the way we think about this is, in a way, I would urge you to think about this. Is if you are in an event facility, it's highly likely that you are not just worrying about your job, right? There's probably a lot of people to make an event facility operate. There's a lot of people. It's not a one-man show, not a one-woman show. There's a lot of things going on. So the way we think about it is, sometimes when we make some of these harder decisions, it's not just for me, for my wife, for one of our managers. It's because there's 30 livelihoods that come here, feed their families from here, and we need to make sure we protect that so that we're protecting them. Does that make sense? Cool. Do you have anything to add?
Any questions?
We're going to walk into the
All
tent.
right.
Conduit attached to metal frames is up all year long. This stuff never comes down. The electrical outlets never come down. We do shut the electrical outlets off in the fall at the breaker. All that stuff gets shut off, so there's no power out here. Which just avoids the opportunity of something stupid happening, heavy snow, something breaking, something shorting, causing more electrical issues. So we shut all the power off back at the breaker going into the fall. But the panels themselves come down and go up every year. And this is a huge management issue.
When you said panels, you're talking about the material, right?
Yeah, the white panel
The
here.
physical metal structure stays up, but the material itself, the white, comes down.
So this tent here is called a Navitrack. And if you look, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's little channels that these run up. We actually do this ourselves here. There are companies that can put them up and take them down. But we do it ourselves, so it saves money. Plus, we know our tent really well, so we pay attention to the things that we know to pay attention to. One of the things that's important to bring up, so tent is this is excellent for a lot of the stuff that we do. It's also, in terms of total expense, it's quite a bit cheaper originally than building a whole new, a building this size is probably close to $1 million today to build it commercially. And you can put up a tent this size for probably a fifth of that. So it saves a lot of cost there. But every year we go through and we replace panels. These panels have a lifespan of about 5 years or so, 5 to 10 years. We're told 10 years by the manufacturer, but for us it seems to be about 5 years, roughly. So that we don't have to replace the whole thing all at once, basically every year, we're going through, we have a schedule. We'll replace the hip one year, and then we'll replace the 20-foot section, or 15-foot section the next year, and another 15-foot section the next year, 15, and then the last hip. We keep it on a cycle, that way we're only spending X amount per year. Go ahead.
Do you think that the panels are like not working for 10 years because of being in New Hampshire and like all different weather, or?
So the big reason they're not working really well, that they don't last that long, is because we send them away every fall to be cleaned. And there are basically two types of cleaning. Well, it's like anything, right? It's trade-offs to everything here. So you can have the tent come back crystal clean, sparkling white, or you can have the tent come back a little better than what you sent. The problem is, to make it crystal clean, sparkling white, the chemicals that we have to use are detrimental and really damage the integrity of the material.
Accelerate the weathering of the material.
Exactly. So we make the trade-off, we accept the trade-off that we are cleaning them really well. They look great for every year. They look like they're brand new every year. But the negative is we have a lower lifespan. And we made that decision about 5 years ago to do that. And it probably is the reason that we're going through it so good. The other thing you'll notice, see all these little pinholes?
Yeah.
All those pinholes, there's a material that we use to patch them. We do these about once a month, once every 2 months or so when time allows. To be flat out honest, I don't know what causes it. We don't know what exactly.
Come on, birds.
No idea. It's
$1
strange.
million idea, guys, right here.
Yeah.
What is causing these holes?
Yeah.
Did somebody drunk flicking a cigarette up?
It's a giant pain. But we go through and hit all those holes. They typically don't have a water issue because they're so small. The pitch of the roof is high enough that the water sheds off, and we don't have a lot of it dripping down. But it's still an issue. We go through. It's a management issue. We go through and take care of it. Was there any questions in here? So this is our entrance tent. Guests, when they come in here, they in the corners here.
This is just one portion of a larger tent here. I just want you to all take in too, the intangible we talk about, the experience, the vibe. I mean, if I'm shelling out the money to have a wedding at a winery, this is what I want to see, right? I mean, it's a beautiful aesthetic.
Yeah, and part of the design of the whole structure is, with that in mind, you'll see it when we walk out to the wedding lawn, how there's almost this like kind of panoramic view of everything, and that was all built intentionally to have that, to give you that feeling. And that matters for a couple different things. It matters for sales at the facility, right? You're gonna have weddings if the place doesn't wow from the get-go. And also it's for guest experience. When the guest shows up, so your guest is a wedding events planner or a manager. Your guest, your customer is the bride and groom. It's unlike a restaurant. Where a restaurant, every person in the facility is a customer. For us, we've really got one customer, about 170 of their friends, 250 of their friends, 350 of their friends to take care of, right? So we also want them to have that same experience, and this is where I was talking about how it all works together. So when they come here, we want people to have a really great experience. The place is beautiful. It creates a feeling, right? There's a sense of A, comfort, B, they remember it really well. It creates like a good memory. And C, hopefully they found something that they really enjoy. It's like some wine or spirit. And that way, either they buy more from us when they're leaving that night, they'll pick up a bottle of bourbon or a bottle of gin or a bottle of Cuba White, something that helps them remember our facility, which then acts as a billboard on their shelf, right? So every time they walk by it, they're thinking about our brand. Or they have such a great experience and maybe they want to come back for a dinner, or maybe they want to come back for a brunch, or maybe they want to come and bring friends and come just do a tasting at some point. So really the whole idea is to craft is high quality of an experience all around. Even though they're not technically your customers, they are potential customers at some point.
Word of mouth, just to add on to that, we talk about word of mouth a lot, right? You have these positive experiences. Wow, I mean, I'm from inner city Boston, and I didn't know that this beautiful place existed just over the border. I went to this wedding here. We should consider this honey for our wedding, kind of thing, right? That was a general honey to the wall, not to any.
Yeah. So that part right there is the entrance tent. That is the. There's where we come in. We typically do food service over there. if it's a buffet. It's also our backup. So when we have an events facility, when we're having weddings, we can't have a situation that works 75% of the time, right? We can't have a situation that even works 99% of the time, because there's always going to be that 1% of the time. And what do you do if that 1% of the time is on somebody's wedding, right? So we always have to have backup strategies for every possible scenario. So our backup strategy for inclement weather is this side tent here. So we could operate this facility with just this tent, but this tent gives us a backup ceremony space where in the backdrop we still have the view of the grapevines. We just turned this field and just planted rye, so it doesn't look very nice right now. But typically there's some form of agriculture growing on that field, whether it be corn or rye, wheat, sunflowers. It's always something. So that's still in the backdrop. We still have the image that we were hoping for our wedding photos. And then this is where we do dinner service, primary dinner service. This is set up like this right now because we've been doing yoga in here, and they come in and just kind of push everything to the side. Basically, we can handle, in this space, we can handle 300 people, which is a lot. We typically don't do weddings that size. Really, a big wedding is in the 250 category. That's a very big wedding. There's not, less than probably 5 to 10% of the weddings that occur are in that space. The vast majority of weddings that occur are between 100 and 200 people, and really it does kind of balance out right around 130, 150, somewhere in that range. That's the vast majority of size of the wedding.
If you don't want to answer, it's fine. But would you mind? What would be a general cost range of a wedding? And like I said, I don't want to put you on the spot.
So every venue is very different, and this is an important thing because you're all of the age where you'll probably get married in the future. I'm assuming most people in this group haven't been married already, but when you go to an event venue and you price out a wedding, a lot of people get really hung up on how venues are priced. Like, oh, this group charges by the fork, like I got to pay for every fork. And this group just has one whole package fee. Typically the package fee thing seems to be what people really like versus a la carte, everything a la carte. But what I would tell you, when you look around here at this whole place and how many people there are to keep this place in operation, it costs X to do that, right? No matter what. It doesn't matter whether we have 5 weddings, 100 weddings, it costs X. And we're not like a restaurant where the sky's the limit, right? We have almost, I say unlimited capacity, it's not unlimited. Obviously there's a capacity to a restaurant. But once it's completely full, completely packed, we build more space or we build another restaurant, right? This is a little different than that. So we've only got 50 weddings a year. And other venues may have, if they're going all year, they may have 70. But there's only X amount of weddings that are going to occur. And the expense for the facility has to be taken care of in those 50 or 70 weddings for the year, and hopefully make a profit. So an event facility like this, and every facility is different, an event facility like this can run anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000 for a wedding, and this is including the catering. So if you were to get married at Flag Hill, we take care of everything except flowers, cake, which we have an option for, but we don't typically handle it. Flowers, cake, photos, and DJ. We take care of everything else. You don't have to worry about anything else. Just show up and it's dealt with. So it can range, that $7,000 to $10,000 range, all the way up to an event venue like ours can with every bell and whistle imaginable, can be in the $30,000 to $40,000 range. It really depends. There's a wide gamut there. For us to make sense for all the staff that we have to staff this place, what it costs in linen, what it costs in maintenance to turn the lights on, we figure that we can't have an event in this space for less than $5,000. It's a loss. It's a net loss. It's a what we call a red revenue event. Red meaning losing money on the revenue. So anything under $5,000 we really consider to be basically a non-starter, unless there's a very specific reason. And this will come up too. There's sometimes where we'll do events for people who we know with corporate events, where we know maybe we're doing a little tiny event right now. It doesn't cost, we're going to lose money on this, but this event, this group, is somebody who does events a lot, and they do large events. Maybe it's a hospital network or something like that, and they have to get their foot. We have to get our foot in the door some way, and prove that we are the quality that they're looking for. And then later on down the road, more comes from that. And this strategy has worked really well. That has happened quite a few times. So that's an effective strategy.
Brian, I wanted to ask you on a total sidebar. Are you alright with them taking photos?
Sure, yeah, you can take photos.
So if you guys need to take photos of things, anything that would help the going, that you guys go for it. I meant to ask that.
Yeah, you're good. So the other thing I want to point out in this room, there's a couple of all of this lighting, everything you see here, all this comes down and goes back up every year. It takes us about a week, a couple people, about a week to put the tent up, and about a week to take it down in the fall.
Big structure, guys.
Yeah,
this is no joke of a tent.
There's a lot of little moving pieces.
You see all the different things, right? We got indirect lighting right here. It's going to be setting sort of mood lighting or party lighting and things like that.
And these are LED. These are actually really good. We call these uplights. These things right here are called uplights. These are really great. This specific brand is LED, and it runs off from an app on your phone. So basically, we can snap a photo of a color and project that color. So if a bride has a very specific color that she wants the theme of the wedding to be, we can snap that picture, and then as it starts to get dark out, we can illuminate the top of the tent in that exact color, which is really, really nice.
Talk about LED and flexibility.
Yeah, they're great.
Right there.
Yeah, they're really great. If you're looking at uplighting, LED is pretty much the only route, in my opinion. There's really not a reason. There's not a lot of reasons to look anywhere else. And then all this lighting, for the most part, comes down and goes away every year. Basically, it's Christmas tree lighting, the twinkle lighting, and that is essentially basically throw away. And then the globe lights overhead, they get cleaned every year. They come down, and we spend about a day going through and cleaning those. Basically, it's a mild caustic solution, 1% weight by volume caustic solution. Somebody wears gloves, and they grab it with the curlicues, grab it with a scrubby, and just work their way through every one of them. It's very tedious, but it results in us not having to replace that lighting every year, which is very expensive. The other thing I want to point out in here are the heaters. So we have two different types of ways to get gas to these heaters. So the first one is a ball tank, like a propane tank, which everyone has seen. Everyone knows what one of those is. And when we go around the corner here, you'll be able to see the one over there. We have a ball tank up there and a ball tank over there. But a couple years ago, when we buried a propane tank back here, so that we could do the fire rack, we put in line plumbing for gas all the way around the edge here. So all these tent heaters are now plumbed in line, which saves us some maintenance every year, having to move things around. Also makes the facility much safer, so we don't have propane tanks sitting around that could be tipped over, knocked over, anything like that. Obviously, we take precautions to make sure that kind of stuff doesn't happen, but it's always possible something you can't foresee happening happens. So these tent heaters, there's 6 of them. We basically double-sized the tent heaters in this facility. We have twice the capacity necessary to heat this space. And the reason we have twice the capacity we need to heat this space is because we want to be able to manage snowfall. So if there was ever a snow event during a wedding, because we go late into October, if there's ever a snow event, we would be able to crank these heaters, and it would actually get the roof, because the heat rises, they would actually get the roof hot enough to help melt the snow off, to slide it off like a rain event. Because if there was significant snowfall, like, a foot and a half an hour or more, which would be extreme, a foot an hour, we would have to basically say no event, doesn't work, too much risk for the tent coming down. The other thing that I want to say about tent heaters is if you ever get in a situation, there'll be an engineering firm I'm sure to help you out with this. But if you're ever in the situation where you're trying to plan tent heaters for a space, the other thing to take into account is human bodies. We are all little heat factories. So do not underestimate the how much heat 150 people in a room creates. It's a lot of heat energy. A lot of heat energy. Okay, we're gonna walk this way. Does anyone have any questions? How are you on time?
We're doing great. Yeah, remember, always reminding you continuously of the establishment that you're in.
The other thing I should bring up before we exit the tent is this flooring. This flooring is basically tennis flooring. This material gets put down every year. So crack seal, put this stuff down every year. And the other thing I didn't show was in between the tents, there's actually drainage. So,
You didn't think we'd forget about drainage.
so all that, well, it's a lot of surface area, right? So if we're getting an inch per hour over that surface area, but it's all getting congregated in one spot, that's a lot of water going to one spot. How do you get rid of it? So we've actually got, if you want, anyone who wants to is more than welcome by these 2 barrels here on the right to peel back this area and look back in here and see the drainage. You can actually stand right from the floor.
Okay, what kind of drainage is it? What do you think? Sort of a tricky one. What do you think?
A French drain?
It's like a French drain. It's got a channel, but it's really just like an area drain, right? It's where the central water, it's coming probably on a pitch to this area and then taking it away.
Yep.
To some larger piece, like a diversion swale or sending it down line, bubbling.
And at some point, so yeah, this actually goes, this goes down to, this drains to a tank, which then drains to a diversion swell, runs down along the side of the property.
Gotcha.
So the problem with our system, and this is something to know, the problem with our system is that if we had all of that water come off the roof at high speed and hit, where's it going to hit? It's going to hit that side panel over there. We're trying to do food service in here. That really doesn't work, right? If there's water splashing all over the place. So we've got a gutter system in. The problem with the gutter system is now we've taken all that surface area and instead of spreading it across this section, we've now necked it down into this section, a little tube that comes down to the drain.
You can see how busy your gutter gets on the side of your house, right? That's a small roof. I mean, this is like that times 50.
Yeah, so it's
a serious volume.
So we underestimated how big this drain needs to be, and this will be something, a facility maintenance item, that when the time comes to do some floor maintenance here, which is coming soon, we're probably less than 3 years away from that. When that moment comes, this will get dug up and bigger drains will go in to be able to handle a higher volume of water. So any questions about that?
Cool. Water maintenance, especially here, this type
It's
of
huge.
facility is huge, right?
Yeah, it's huge.
You don't want to have someone putting out all this money. I like how you frame that. The bride and groom are your primary customers, right? And then you got your bride in your white dress going around the corner and you get 6-inch deep puddles.
Yeah.
You know, that type of thing.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue. Water is one of the harder parts of a facility design, which usually there's an engineer that does all that stuff. And most places will force you to get an engineer to do all that stuff, so you won't even have to really worry about it. For us, we're in a town where that wasn't necessary originally, and so we've kind of done it all by back of the envelope calculations, and sometimes math is wrong. So, or at least the person doing the math is wrong. This item, especially when you're on a farm that grows 50 ton of fruit a year. Bees hang around, there's a lot of them. So trying to manage and make sure people aren't getting stung, that's obviously an important thing. So that's always a constant maintenance item. So when we walk out, one last thing here. This is the propane ball I was talking about. And you'll notice that that's chained to the building by code. That's supposed to be secured in some way to something that's finished. So when we walk out here, you'll see this kind of this was all by intention. This kind of like panoramic, it looks like a panoramic photo. This makes for absolutely beautiful wedding photos, which is obviously a huge part of what, it sounds silly, but a lot of it comes down to when people are walking through your facility, they're thinking, where am I going to take photos? What are they going to look like? Because it's something that they're going to try to remember, they're going to want to remember for the rest of their life, right? So even though we kind of laugh it off to some degree of like, oh, we're spending $20,000 for a photo,
Gotta get those likes, Brian. Come on.
Yeah.
Let's be honest here.
It matters. It matters drastically. The other thing that I would bring up, although this is not a great example of it because we have so much clover in here right now, but we spend a lot of money on lawn maintenance. So this gets mowed twice a week. The more you mow grass, the better, as long as it's healthy. This is sprinkled, which we're in a drought, so that's a problem. And then it gets fertilized with a product called Milligrit, which is really great, and I'd highly recommend it. It's basically, it sounds gross, but it's when the waste treatment facilities have all that extra organic matter, they basically send it to a company in Massachusetts that turns it into all that excrement has nitrogen in it, and nitrogen is needed for the grass to be really green. And then we take this product called Milligrit, put it on the lawn, and it actually slowly feeds the grass over a long period of time. Recycling.
Yeah, truth.
Recycling.
All that dog poop I've been picking up all these years.
It's really great, but normally in about a week and a half, 2 weeks, we'll do a thing called weed and feed, where we'll go through and kill out all the clover, and that'll give a chance for the underlying grass, the Kentucky bluegrass that's underneath to come up through. There's actually two grasses right here. There's Kentucky blue, and then there's another one that I cannot remember the name of. There's some pea rye in it, some perennial rye in the grass, but there's very little perennial rye. It's mostly the fescues, and they're hardier grasses. So there's different types of grass. Higher traffic area, you want a hardier grass. I know it sounds crazy that we think about grass at this level, but if you're having an event venue where people are going to be standing right on that same spot 3 times a weekend, and nervously too, right?
Yeah.
They're about to get married, so they're not at the calmest state they've ever been. So they're moving their feet around, walking around, and you don't want that to be all dirt all the time, right?
Yeah.
So
if you have a wedding every week or multiple, you
multiple
don't have time to
weekend.
replace the lawn.
You need grasses that are super hardy
would've thought of
and
that.
able to kind of hold up to all the beating that we're going to put them through. Is there any questions about anything out here?
You guys have questions about anything so far?
Very rare for you to be able to see. And this is totally off subject, but it's just a really cool thing to show. Why are vineyards built on hillsides typically? Does anyone know?
Think, folks. What do you think?
I talked to you.
Water is part of it, definitely. You see sandy soils, this is really good. Grapes don't like wet feet, they're from the desert. So they like to be dry. So sand is great, right? Sand and slope will get the water away from the vine's roots. But there's another reason. In the early spring, what are we worried about? We just had bud break. Okay, does anyone know anything about farming in the area? Nothing. So the big thing that we're always worried about in the spring is frost. Right? So if we look down through here,
There you go.
see at the top here where everything's nice and green, and then down below it gets browner. That's because cool air settles, right? It sinks, warm air rises. When we're on the hillside, the closer we are to the top of the hill, the less likelihood there is of frost damage. At the bottom of the hillside, the more likelihood there is for frost damage. So we had a frost event Saturday. It was 31.5 degrees Fahrenheit right here. Didn't kill this stuff, but the stuff below got damaged. Luckily, all the fruits off the vine, we harvested everything already. But it's just kind of a cool thing to show at how much of a difference a slope can make. Down below in the low-lying area, you see everything is harmed, but up here, not so bad. In the back vineyard, all the way out back, we have the same thing. The sloped areas are doing really well, and the no frost in the low-lying areas or the flat areas had frost damage. So we're really big on this agricultural tourism thing that I've talked about. So we're always trying to build different on-farm experiences. So we want people, we'll kind of walk this way. So we can do a tasting. We can go for our 18-station walking tour, which are what these signs are that you see all over the place here. So we built this. Each one of these has a
QR code, right?
they did have a QR code.
I remember that last time.
That one might have one. Basically, they tell you a little bit about the wines, and a little bit about kind of the agriculture that goes into them. At the bottom here, there's a URL. You can punch that in, it plays an audio file for you. And again, the idea was we get somebody up out of Boston, and you know, let's say they're whoever they might be, right? No matter what their age, but even more so if they were, you know, early 20s, mid 20s. We want them to you know, they made an hour drive. We want them to absolutely love it here, for every possible reason. That way, when it comes time for them to make the decision where they're going to get married, they start thinking about the places they've been. And, wow, I loved Flag Hill. I know they do weddings. Let's check it out. So it's part of that whole strategy of making sure there's as many linking experiences to try to get people back to kind of that purchase decision.
Hey, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, right? But isn't the land here zoned as conservation land?
Yeah, so that's another cool thing. Well, it's cool if you're somebody coming up out of Boston. If you're somebody running an events facility that has a distillery and winery on it that's trying to grow their business, it's a little less cool. This has a conservation easement on it. So what that means is that this land is permanently protected to be in agriculture in perpetuity, meaning forever. That area that we were just in, that little 3-acre block that we were just on, the whole place we were, like when you pulled in, the buildings, all of that is on a heritage easement, which means that the face of it cannot change, but we can do changes to the property up there. We can build buildings, do stuff like that. We can technically build buildings on this part of the property. I have 1.7 acres I can build on in total as the easement's written. The problem is it has to all be for the purpose of agriculture. So if the building does anything other than agriculture, it's not. So the distillery, by the transitive law of algebra, is agriculture because we're growing the corn, right? So, and I make that joke all the time about weddings, that via the transitive law of algebra, the weddings are more agriculture than this vineyard is, because this vineyard would not exist without those weddings. Right. This is a very expensive thing to maintain and take care of. It costs us about $70,000 a year or so just to keep the vines. That's it. That's nothing else. That's just them existing and making sure they don't turn into weeds. So it can be very cost intensive.
Brian, with it being zoned as conservation easement, right, does that mean that the general public can walk on this property at any time?
Exactly. Well, yes. Yes and no. It's still private property.
Okay. But for like a recreation purpose?
Yes, for recreation.
Hence the signage? And,
exactly. Yeah, we don't have it posted so people can hunt here. We do ask, now this could be a possible point of confrontation for us at some point. If somebody wanted to hunt here and they knew the law well enough and were just that big of a
jerk.
A jerk, thank you. There we go.
Getting into some conflict here.
All the language I would normally use I didn't want to use. That big of a jerk, they could go hunting while there was a wedding going on. But almost everybody stops and asks, most people are polite. They stop and ask permission, and you say, okay, great, I have no problem with it, just please don't do it during these hours because there could be a wedding going on. And everybody knows how much a bride loves a gunshot.
Yeah, makes for a hell of a photo, you know?
Yeah, it doesn't work out that well. So this is all corn here. This is all our bourbon corn. So this will make our bourbon, and it will make the neutral spirits for our sugar maple liqueur, our blueberry liqueur, our cranberry liqueur, and our raspberry liqueur. So by growing all of this stuff, we control. So we kind of have a theme and a motto here at Flag Hill, which is quality of input in is equal to or greater than quality of output out. You cannot make something better than the sum of the parts. So what that means is if you've ever, does anyone here cook? Yeah, cool. So we all know then that if we start with a crappy tomato, we don't make a wonderful dish, right? If we're trying to make bruschetta, don't make great bruschetta with a crappy tomato. Simple as that. Which is why we grow a greenhouse full of tomatoes, which actually just got pulled because we had a disease pressure issue this year. But normally the greenhouse is full of peppers, tomatoes, eggplant.
I mean, I remember in previous stores we've been in there and you've got some serious.
Yeah, it's crazy. But this year it's we just pulled it.
That live thing, right?
It's live. That's hot. Don't touch it.
That's a live.
And that's why we've got the signs everywhere, all over the fence saying electric. So these are heritage breed pigs. This is actually, I know it sounds crazy, this is actually part of the experience of people being here. Having animals, it makes it a family-friendly place. So even if mom and dad want to come have a glass of wine, there's still something for the kids to do. These heritage breed pigs are really great too because they actually forage on pasture. So this back here is planted with a mixture of brassicas, beet, kale, turnip, rake, all kinds of different stuff, and basically the pigs eat through that. We do supplement them with a little bit of whiskey grain, spent whiskey grain, and on Sundays they usually get wedding cake. They have a pretty sweet life. They have a pretty sweet existence.
These guys are living the dream.
Yeah. The reason that we raise the heritage breed pigs is they're a little different than the pork you buy in the grocery store. So the pigs are a little bit shorter and a little bit stouter, and the meat actually marbles up much more like beef does than pork. So it actually tastes quite a bit different. And back to my statement, if quality of input in is equal to or greater than quality of output out, you can't make something better than some of the parts. This is one of those things that we mean. Like our pulled pork, if you've ever been to one of our events and you've had our pulled pork, it's unreal. It's very different from normal. Very different from normal pulled pork. We do for dinners in the winter. We typically do pork chops, like French pork chops, French bone pork chops. And again, the pork chops are very different than what you normally get in the grocery store. There's a couple other points to note here. One is that these pigs are actually much better for you. This pork is much better for you than what you buy in a grocery store. By being raised on pasture, they have a lot of land. All this land back here is theirs to roam in, run around. They get sunlight. Obviously, you can see the pigs, they wallow in mud. It's kind of part of what they do.
All that, but they like right in the mud.
I know, exactly. But by being raised on pasture, they actually get a different relationship of omega-6 versus omega-3 fatty acids. They have more omega-3 fatty acids, so the pork's actually better for you. And the other thing of why we've continued to do this, other than they turn spent whiskey grain into bacon, which is a pretty cool trick. The other reason we've continued to do this is we conduct how many events here a year? Quite a few, and our staff, it's very easy, if you're not the highest paid person at a facility, it's very easy to get into a mind frame of I don't care that much about certain things. Being wasteful with meat is not only expensive, but it's also there's ethical implications. So by having the animals here, our staff gets to know them, gets to love them. We kind of connect those dots and think about those things. And we're a little more responsible with our meat service, which I think is a huge benefit.
You understand what he's saying? You're more in touch with the animal, and inevitably when this animal becomes food, you're much more likely to use all of its uses and be respectful of it versus a hunk of bacon you're getting off the truck.
Exactly. It's I would be lying. It is probably one of the worst days on the farm every year when we send the pigs. Depending on the day. Some pigs suck. So it's not as bad on those days. But for the most part, so I have a young daughter. She's 5. She experiences that. She understands what that is, what that means. It's not a fun. It's not a super fun thing, right? Nobody loves that part of it. But it is if we choose to eat meat, it's part of the life that we have, and it's a good thing to be connected to it in a lot of ways. That's my opinion of it. That's kind of what we preach to our staff. And I have seen a meaningful difference and change in how we conduct food services because of that thought. So it is good for the bottom line, but it's also good to make sure people are kind of connected to that thing. Is there any questions about that? Cool. Then the other thing that I'll point out right here is this is Rivercrest Villas back here. It'll be a 20 villa development when it's completed, and it's for short-term stays. It's got 5 villas completed right now. The idea is for
this is all new since last time I was here.
Yeah, this is we've been building this since last spring, and we put a halt on it. We should have had 10 more this year, but we put a halt on it because of the financial concerns with COVID. So we've kind of got a moratorium on this for the moment. But these, basically, when it's all said and done, again, what we're trying to plan into is agricultural tourism. We're trying to get people to travel here from a long ways away and get an understanding of what we're doing here, see it through the lens that we're talking about, and appreciate it through the lens that we're talking about it. Hopefully, over time, through that experience, they will remember the wines in a positive light, the spirits in a positive light, not just because of the flavor of them, but also because of the whole experience they had. Has anyone ever traveled out of the country to a place like Italy or France or anything like that and had wine in one of those places, and it's amazing, and you bring some of it home and you try it at home and you're like, it's not as good. Like, why is it not as good? It's not as good because of the experience. I could talk for an hour and a half about just that topic of how much our neurochemicals play a role in how we, as the viewer, experience a moment in time. But we are trying to take that same kind of concept as what you experience there and bring it to a place like this. So if you're on vacation, you get the family up here, coming out of wherever it might be, when you come here, everything put together hopefully helps create a beautiful, memorable experience about what the place was, plus what the wines are, and being able to stay here is another piece to that. Wake up in the morning. We recommend waking up if you and anyone here is welcome to do this. People are welcome to the farm 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. But I would highly recommend, if you are an early riser, come over some morning and just sit on the wedding lawn for the sunrise. It is unreal, absolutely unreal. So all that stuff together kind of plays to the experience that we're trying to create and the feeling we're trying to create, so that people remember Flag Hill and this really memorable wedding.
So with COVID, do you not have to keep reservations for that? Because you just come?
I'm sorry, say that again?
People that just like come and sit on the lawn, like you need reservations to do so?
No, so it's think of it like a state park in a way. It's not the same thing, but think of it like that. It's you can show up. We do ask people to make sure they're wearing a mask, things like that. If they're in close proximity, if you're within 6 feet of somebody, we ask people to wear a mask. If you're outside, though, we have people walking the farm all the time and they don't wear masks, which we're fine with because they're outdoors and they're away from people. But no, you don't need a reservation to come here. You need a reservation to come into the tasting room, or to come to a tasting. But if you just wanted to show up here and go for a walk, to do the 18 station walking tour, you're more than welcome to do that anytime you wanted to.
There's a lot of land. It's almost like a dirty little secret, if you will, in New Hampshire, that there's a lot of land that is conservation land. Lots.
A lot of land.
And so on those, and you'll learn if you've taken this class with Lauren, 772 Law and Policy, you'll learn about the 7 to 10 different types of traditional recreation, right? And the various forms of recreation are allowed on conservation lands. So what you may think is private, such as land like this, as Brian has alluded to, you can hike on it, just depending on what's allowed. Sounds like hunting, maybe even camp, things like that.
Because of the hunting thing, I would recommend, because there are people that hunt it, if you're hiking during hunting season out here, wear orange, wear bright colors. You don't have to wear blazer, but just wear bright colors and be noisy. Don't, like, if you're going through the woods, don't try to
be sneaking.
Yeah, don't be sneaking around. Just be noisy, be talking, and you'll have no problems. And there's a 110 acre farm. There's a whole other section. We abut the Lamprey River and the North River. They come together right here. It's actually a big reason why the landscape is the way it is, and I can talk about that on the way back up. But the 2 rivers back there, unbelievably scenic. And you can also kayak there if you want to bring kayaks over. I usually leave 2 kayaks out there. We don't typically recommend that people that we don't know go grab them, but there's always 2 kayaks out there. Some people do grab them and go. And there's a whole other section back here where there's a barn and more grain fields. But we'll head back up. Birds here as well, but the chickens we do for eggs, we do them because just like tomatoes, just like we grow tomatoes in the greenhouse, because if you ever had a tomato out of the grocery store, you can't actually get a great tomato from the grocery store. It's impossible. The physics and the chemistry of it doesn't allow it. So we try to grow the things that make a meaningful difference, and eggs are one of those things. It's really hard. If you go to the grocery store, typically the egg that you buy has been in that supply chain for at least a month, at least. Whereas for us, when we're gonna have a brunch, chef's been getting eggs that week, typically within a couple days, and has all the eggs he needs for brunch. So we typically have about 30 to 40 layer hens, making sure that happens for us. We also, so you'll notice if you look down, this is all mowed. So it's all part of that experience, making sure people have places to walk, and that the place looks really nice. It's a lot of energy that goes into this. We typically go through about 3,000 to 5,000. It depends on the year. That's probably an extreme statement. So we're around $3,000 a year in maintenance for our mowers. You could pay somebody to have a mowing contract. They typically charge about $75 an hour. For this place, it's way cheaper for us to just pay people to sit on a mower and for us to maintain our own mowers. So like I said, we go through about $3,000, sometimes $5,000 a year in maintenance expense on the mowers. So just mowing can be a massive expense to a facility like this. The other thing I want us to notice is we look under our feet. Kind of touched on it up there. We have lots of sand in the soil. That's because we have the Lamprey River right there. As it meandered back and forth across the landscape, it actually deposited all kinds of different material in the ground. So we've got sand on this. We've got. So it's amazing. We have huge sand deposits where it's beach sand. And then, because back before there was a dam on the Lamprey River, it was tidal, hundreds of thousands of years ago, if not millions of years ago. And then we'll have complete pockets of clay. In terms of being a farm, it can be a very challenging thing. But the reason I bring it up is that soil structures can be a problem when growing grass. We have all sand at the top of this hill. So the reason that wetting lawn looks like it does is because we had to keep bringing in organic matter and loam to make sure we bolstered it and made it look really nice. It also drains the soil really well, so it requires a lot of extra water. The other thing I wanted to bring up, so we're really good here at in the Northeast at making aromatic white wines. That's what we excel at. It's just not in the cards for us to make reds. We do make a couple, and they are really good. They're just really good inside of a very small bandwidth of what is possible. If all the wines in the world were on a scale from 1 to 10, not in terms of quality, but just in terms of what can exist, a place like Napa for red wine can make anything from like a 2 to an 8. Here in Lee, New Hampshire, we can make red wines from like a 5.567 to like a 5.568. It's a very, 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 very small bandwidth. I should point out this too, I didn't talk about this. These are table grapes here. We do have three rows of you-pick table grapes. Again, trying to add to that visitor experience in the fall. People can come in, take them home, make juice, make pie. If you've ever had a grape pie, they're awesome. And it kind of keeps adding to that visitor experience. But in the world of white wine, we have these beautiful fall temperatures, cold, crisp fall temperatures. Heat is the #1 contributor to aromatic white wine quality. The colder it is, the better the wine's going to be. If we are harvesting at 80 degrees, I'm going to make significantly less aromatic of a wine than if I'm harvesting at 50 degrees. And the logic for this is really simple, because I saw a bunch of hands go up for people cooking. We've all cooked a soup before, I'm sure. And we've all smelt that soup cooking all day in our house, and it smells so amazing, right? We cannot wait to eat the soup. It smells incredible. We sit down to eat the soup, and it's bland. Has this ever happened to anybody? It's happened to me, and I know the science behind why this happens. And I still am dumb enough to do it.
It's fairly tough.
So basically what you're doing is you're cooking off all your flavor. Watch, this will be a little bit muddy right here. So you're basically cooking off all your flavor. Because everything that you think of as flavor, everything you think of as taste is actually an aromatic compound. So we'll just kind of wash this area, it'll be a little bit slick. We just got done harvesting last week. So it's still kind of a muddy mess. So, everything you've ever thought about as the taste of something is nothing more than an aromatic compound. So you don't actually know what a raspberry smells like. You know what a raspberry, or what a raspberry tastes like. You know what a raspberry smells like. Taste is just, bitter, sour, sweet, umami, things like that.
Well, if you lose your sense of smell, you lose your sense of taste.
Exactly. So these aromatic compounds, these aromatic properties are very, very loosely bound, oftentimes in the chemical matrices of the wine. So if we break that barrier at 50 degrees Fahrenheit versus 80 degrees Fahrenheit, we keep a significantly higher percentage of the aromatics than if we break it at a cooler temperature, or than at a warmer temperature. So that's why here in the north, one of the big reasons why here in the Northeast we can make really, really exceptionally aromatic white wines. So we're gonna walk into here really quickly. Out here, these 3 bins, these are our working silos. These handle grain management for our whiskey production. And the reason these are out here and not inside, a couple things. One of the biggest reasons is because they keep the dust down. They keep the dust out here, right? So that makes it so we don't have to clean as much in terms of removing dust, but it's also a health hazard issue. And it's one of the problems with a facility like this where we have multiple occupancies in one place. We have multiple different things. We've got the winery, we've got the distillery, we've got mercantile, we've got catering and events, food service. It's all the office space upstairs. There's all these different things that that creates different zoning for fire codes and health codes and all these different things. So every step we can take to make sure that things are protected, dust is kept down, there's less explosion risk. All those things are very important. So this being out here allows us to basically make the facility much more safe, much more manageable.
If you're not familiar, basically what we're talking about too is when you get a lot of dust, particularly grain dust in a tight environment, it can combust.
Thank you. I probably should have talked about that.
No,
it's a pretty important thing.
We're a good team. It can combust, right? And I think a lot of stuff that, correct me if I'm wrong too, that this is a retrofitted building.
It
right?
is, yeah. This was an old dairy barn.
It wasn't built for these purposes. The entire facility was not built for these purposes necessarily. So a lot of that is a retrofit, and that really ties into your maintenance needs and your facility-related needs, you know. Yeah. And I would venture to say that the vast majority of places you're ever going to work are going to be retrofitted facilities. It's rare that it's this brand new multi-million-dollar facility all rolled out and everything's perfect.
Yeah, they do exist, but they're kind of like unicorns a little bit.
And then the Parks and Rec world, like physical parks, are almost all retrofits. They were huge in the 50s, 60s, 70s, mainly in the 50s. We saw huge investments in parks, and now they're all being retrofitted, right? And so we talk about things like ADA and things of this nature, right? That's why it can become very hard to flip a new building and make it ADA compliant.
And that's actually something to bring up here. This is a very difficult, this farm is very difficult to make ADA compliant. We do our best. You'll notice there's ramps going into the tasting room. There's ramps going into the bathrooms. There's doorknobs are positioned specifically. There's a lot of things that we've thought about. There's no stairs coming down into the tent area, or there's a way to get there without stairs. But it can be very difficult and challenging to do that in a retrofit facility. It's definitely easier to plan that stuff in from the get-go.
And you purchased this in 1990, right?
I bought this in 2015.
Wasn't it originally, why do I know 1990?
That was the original farm day. I said that was the original winery day. That was when, so the grapes were planted in 87, I think. They started planting in 87. And then in 90, I think, was when they officially became like a winery. And then I bought the farm in 2015.
And we know ADA, right, of 93, so this is a grandfathered facility for a lot of components, right? But then we talk a lot in this class about what's reasonable and reasonable accommodations, right? And Brian's going above and beyond to provide reasonable accommodations, but is it reasonable to pave a path all the way down to the pig area, right, and to put lifts in? Probably not. Right? This is a good example of it. What is reasonable?
Yeah.
I think it's reasonable to have a ramp in the front, right? You see what I'm saying?
And by, this path through the center here is very hard, and it's driven over all the time, and we keep it mowed really low. So it's still, if we get the question, is it accessible by wheelchair to go down there? We let people know there's a relatively steep hill. We let people know what they could be experiencing, and then they can make a decision for themselves. And a lot of times we do get people that make a decision to venture down there, which is great. But that is part of the idea of keeping everything really well maintained. Is we keep where if somebody wants to go off the beaten path in something like a wheelchair, it's not as difficult than if it wasn't as well maintained. we're gonna kind of walk in here. It's gonna be a little bit loud. So we're gonna be really brief in here. We are right in the middle of harvest. I make this joke every year, and you're actually here at a time where it matters. We are just starting fermentations. Remember how earlier I said every aromatic property, or everything you taste is just an aromatic property, an aromatic compound? So, basically, if anyone were to say right now that it smells really great and this one really fruity, I would not be very happy with you. That's you telling me that, hey Brian, all the flavor's leaving your wine. So that's our goal, is to try to keep everything really nice and slow. So you see all these little computers on everything, and you'll see the temperatures on all the wines are really cold. So we have really nice, slow, cold fermentations, traps a lot of those aromatic properties, then we arrest the fermentation early and keep all this stuff in. It's so funny to me that people view wine from the perspective of red wine is like the kind of the upper echelon, the golden goose, the thing that we should strive for, like great big bold red wines. And I think it's funny because making aromatic whites is exponentially harder. Exponentially. They're not even the same ballpark. A monkey could make an okay red wine. They're just aggressive. Just pound the fruit, really hard punch downs, really aggressive strategies, oxygen, all kinds of stuff that we are very, very delicate with. We move the wine very slowly. We keep gaseous blankets on everything, CO2 blankets on everything, so that we don't wind up with an opportunity for oxidation. We keep the wines at the exact right temperature for the entire time. From the moment we harvest until the moment we put it in a bottle, we pay attention to these things. It's a much more challenging form of winemaking. But do we have a mix of 21 and under 21?
Is anyone under 21?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I would know if we didn't have anyone under 21, I'd pass around a glass. Well, we can't even do that with COVID. Can't do that with COVID. Never mind. We're good.
Or UNH.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. But just to get the aromas of what's happening right now, it's amazing. At this stage of winemaking, it's really amazing. So over the course of the next few weeks, we'll be doing things in here, and then basically the rest of winemaking is once we're through fermentation, once the wine is wrapped and filtered, we're basically done until it goes into a bottle. It's a very simple process. In whites, unlike reds, whites do not get better with age, almost always. And even most reds don't. It's only about less than 5% of the world's wine that's meant to be aged for more than a period of 2 years. Almost all other red wine will actually be degraded by aging for longer than that. So, any questions in here? Hard, rough, clean to go through. We just stopped pressing fruit a day ago. So in here, this is tough right now. We're going to spend just a couple seconds in here because it's such a tight space. This is the distillery. This is the still we're making. We make whiskey, gin, vodka, brandy, cordials, rum, all that stuff. The huge grain handling system you saw over there all comes through the wall into this tank right here, where we make bourbon mash, rye mash. And then what we're running right now is actually brandy. So we just released a 13-year-old keg of brandy this year. We had a really great harvest. A lot more fruit than what we were expecting. So on a year like that, we would get a chance to play around a little bit. And our play item this year was one of our play items this year was brandy. So we did 2 fermentations. We did a brandy fermentation with a commercial strain of yeast, and we did a brandy fermentation with a native strain of yeast. Meaning it just came from the air, spontaneous fermentation. And seeing kind of the difference between the two, both go into a barrel for a long period of time. We'll have fun with them on down the road, probably some very long period from now. Probably be my daughter's problem, we'll figure it out. But basically what this does is it boils the solution. The solution here is ethanol, water, and grapes for brandy. The alcohol travels up through the helmet and into the condenser where it's condensed back into a liquid, it comes back out, and then we have, after a couple runs, we have our finished product that we then either put into a barrel or, depending on what happens, if the product can make a liqueur, we then macerate it through or something like that. Is there any question about anything in here? I'm a big fan up here that's always running. It's really important to make sure that we have good air circulation turnover in this facility. It's a benefit during COVID. If anyone's done any of the research on any of this stuff, it's really important to have good airflow, good circulation. That seems to be a major positive. But beyond that, we want to make sure that we don't have, we're working around a bunch of different chemicals, right? We want to make sure that we have nice air circulation or nice air turnover so that the people working around this stuff aren't coming in contact with high quantities of vaporized chemicals that they are smelling all day long, causing all kinds of health problems. It also is good for keeping dust moving, flies, things of that nature. Is there any questions about anything here? Great, we'll head back up. Do you know how to get back up? Taking the opportunity to do some things on the farm that we wouldn't normally get an opportunity to do. So it's a great year for maintenance. Even though the funds are tight, we do what we can there. And it's also great for the farm stuff that we really push hard, right? Like running the greenhouse is a great example of this. We got the greenhouse shut down. We push the greenhouse really hard. We usually have plants in by March, and then we're usually harvesting tomatoes all the way through till late October. And that just is really hard on the soil to have this monoculture year after year after year and really be pounding it with the same thing. Even though we switch the part of the ground that it's in, it still can be hard on the greenhouse. So we started having disease pressure issues. As soon as we saw those issues, we stopped picking fruit, stopped picking tomatoes, pulled everything out, all the eggplant, all the zucchinis, all the cucumbers, everything came out. And then we'll plant a cover crop in there and build organic matter, and we'll do a flush to get all the salts out of the soil that have built up over time. And that will, so basically the moral of the story there is we're taking this opportunity where we normally are just go from the minute that we have even remotely acceptable weather until the moment that we have remotely unacceptable weather. We're going,
It could be tomorrow.
Yeah, well, it's supposed to be tomorrow.
No, I'm kidding. Tomorrow's good, but I mean, like you were saying, it's
Oh,
30
yeah.
degrees and then 80. You know?
Don't scare me like that.
We have a few more days. Good weekend.
I was like, we're planting
Sorry.
rye right now. That's
Sorry.
not good.
No, not literally tomorrow.
I'm the worst farmer ever. I never know what the weather's going to be tomorrow. No idea.
You're supposed to be right.
That would be beneficial. Anything where an events manager wouldn't have to, any situation where an events manager or their staff wouldn't have to walk a very far distance. And this isn't even extreme. It could be worse than what this parking lot is. But when we have it really full, people can be all the way at the end. We have people parking down here. And it's just a lot of distance to cover. And that the time frame to walk that distance, again, like I said, it's just trying to find ways to condense it or ways where you can monitor it without having somebody physically walking the space. So there's an argument for cameras, but the problem with cameras, most people know that most people are not watching cameras, right? So they know there's not somebody watching the camera at all times, so they just don't pay. It's not a deterrent, right? So if there's somebody, there always will be people trying to drink in the parking lot. It's just inevitable. But if they know people can see them, they've been told not to do it, it's the likelihood of it being a recurring thing. Like maybe you still have to monitor it first event of first of the night, the first hour of the night. But then once people learn that they're not supposed to be doing that, you've had a conversation with them, then hopefully they stop causing the problem for you if they know that you're watching them or could be watching them. If they don't think that, then they just say, oh, I can get away with it because there's nobody out here right now. And that's the real challenge, is not, you'll still always have to have that initial conversation because people come from all over, right? People come from as far away as New Zealand, right? It's like people come from everywhere. They have no idea what the laws are. They don't know that they're doing anything wrong. We don't treat them that they're doing anything wrong. We just let them know, hey, it's a big deal for us if a liquor enforcement officer rolls in right now. We have an alcohol license. We have 30 more events for the rest of this year. All those weddings, are you going to tell them that they can't have their wedding because you had to have a beer in your car? You know what I mean? It's the risk of losing a license is severe. And you really got to be a multiple offender to have something like to get to the point where you lose a license, especially in the state of New Hampshire.
They don't know that.
With that.
They don't know that.
Yeah, they don't
Pressure
know.
on them.
Exactly.
You know, you really, what you got to do is just say, hey, Alex, do you want to be the one who has to shut this whole wedding down that you're actively at right now?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Things
No
like
one wants to be that guy.
Yes.
Even if you're the drunk uncle in the family.
things like that. The other thing that I say is, listen, there's 30 people that work here. They all have kids. Like, not all of them, but a lot of them have kids. Like, you know, if you shut this place down, what do you? Oh, because you want to have a beer?
Right.
Do you want to fight me over having a beer? You know, we've got beer in there. Come on in, I'll get you the first one. You know what I mean? Something like that.